It started like most stories don't, by accident. In the hills of northern Spain, far from the cities and highways, there stood a forgotten monastery. Its walls were cracked, its roofs falling in, and most believe it had been empty since the 1700s. Overgrown vines twisted through the windows, and only birds and wind passed through its broken halls. But when the local government began a quiet restoration project, mainly to preserve what was left for history, something happened no one expected. One cold morning, a team of restoration workers arrived at the site to begin clearing the collapsed eastern corridor. As they pulled apart the stones, they found a hollow behind the wall, an empty space not shown on any blueprint or old map. There were no doors, no signs that it had ever been touched, just a wall, and then a hidden room. The workers stood in silence. Dust poured into the air, and behind the final brick, they saw it. A small chamber, perfectly preserved. In the middle of the room was a stone table, and on that table, a single book, leather-bound, thick, covered in symbols none of them had ever seen before. The leather looked almost new, but the smell told another story, old, ancient, like it had soaked up the dust of centuries. One worker reached out to touch it, and something strange happened. Every light in the room flickered, even the ones powered by their tools. The wind outside stopped for just a moment. It was small, barely noticeable, but enough for everyone there to feel it, as if the world had taken a breath. They called in the lead archaeologist, a quiet woman named Dr. Sofia Navarro. She examined the book with gloved hands, then froze. She said the symbols didn't match any known language. Not Egyptian, not Sumerian, not Greek, but it looked purposeful, like every mark held meaning. Even more, the paper inside, if it could be called that, felt like nothing she'd touched before. Not parchment, not animal skin, something else entirely. The team decided to send the book to a lab in Madrid for testing. But as they tried to move it, the room grew colder. Their equipment failed twice. Finally, after hours of struggling, they placed it into a special container and transported it under guard. By then, the story had started to spread. Whispers, rumors. The monastery book, they called it. A few online forums picked it up, but no one had any idea what it really was. At the lab, the mystery only deepened. Scientists tried carbon dating, but the machine returned an error several times. When they used microscopes, they found the ink reacted to light. Patterns would appear, then fade. Words seemed to rewrite themselves depending on who was reading. One man said he saw an image on the page, a battlefield. Another saw a peaceful river. The same page, different visions. Within weeks, top linguists, historians, and cryptographers were brought in to study it. Nothing made sense. The language wasn't random, but it wasn't anything known to humans. One expert, a retired professor from Italy, stared at a page for 2 hours before quietly saying, "This book is alive." They laughed at first, but then strange things started happening. The lead scientist's wife, who had been in a coma for 3 months, suddenly woke up after he spent a night reading the book. A lab technician who tried to steal a page from the book broke both legs in a freak elevator accident. Another researcher kept hearing voices, whispers that told him the next page would change his life. He never showed up for work again. The book was locked in a vault. No one touched it for weeks, but the fascination grew. Sofia Navarro stayed behind, studying from scanned copies. What she found haunted her. Certain pages described events from history, accurately, in chilling detail. Not just the big events, like wars and disasters, but small things. A baker in Paris who burned his shop down in 1733. A merchant ship that sank off the coast of Chile. A child born blind in 1911 who later painted masterpieces. And then she found a page with today's date. It mentioned a discovery. A book. A sealed room. She didn't sleep that night. Something was deeply wrong. This wasn't just an old text. It wasn't just a book. It was something else. A map of time? A mirror of reality? Or worse, the author of it? Sofia wrote in her private journal, "If this book has been recording the world all this time, or even shaping it, then what happens when someone writes in it?" She never got an answer. Because the next morning, she was gone. No one saw her leave. No one knows where she went. But on the table, where the book had once been, lay a single page, blank, except for one sentence, written in the strange, shifting symbols. The story begins again. Weeks passed. The world moved on, as it always does, without knowing what it almost stumbled upon. The monastery book, now kept deep within a government facility, had become a silent mystery. Most who had worked on it were transferred or sworn to secrecy. The official report listed it as a historical artifact of unknown origin, but unofficially, off the record, it was feared. Feared because no one could explain what it was. Feared because one woman vanished a day after discovering its secrets. And feared because no one could read it. The strange language remained a wall no one could break, until Elias came along. He wasn't a famous professor, not a scientist or an agent. Elias Renn was a forgotten man. He lived alone in a tiny apartment in Prague, surrounded by books most people couldn't even pronounce. His life was a quiet one. Coffee in the morning, long walks at night, letters never sent. He had once been considered a brilliant mind in the world of ancient texts, until something broke inside him. Some said it was grief. Others said he'd simply gone too deep into his studies. He stopped publishing, stopped speaking at conferences, but he never stopped reading. When he heard rumors of the strange book, just whispers on old online forums, his heart raced in a way it hadn't in years. He had seen those symbols before, not the exact ones, but something close, in the margins of an old Sumerian scroll, in the architecture of a Persian temple, even carved faintly into a stone he had once found buried in the ice of northern Greenland. He reached out. No one answered. So he waited, studied, watched. Eventually, the world brought the book to him. A low-level official from an unnamed department, desperate and afraid, sent Elias a copy of just 3 pages. No explanation, no name, just a note. "Do you understand this?" Elias didn't respond, but he did understand. Not fully, not yet, but enough. Each line of the book used a kind of language he called thread script, a term he invented years earlier while studying lost dialects that seemed to repeat across different cultures and timelines. It wasn't a language like English or Latin. It didn't describe things. It did things. It moved, shifted, changed shape depending on context, mood, even the reader's intent. Elias worked day and night. He translated words not with dictionary, but with intuition, with instinct, with feeling. He believed the book didn't just carry meaning. It carried energy, words that vibrated with something deeper than thought, something close to reality itself. After 2 weeks, he managed to translate a single sentence. He read it out loud, and his window shattered. He lived on the 3rd floor. No wind, no storm, just glass exploding inward, as if something had pushed through from the other side. That night, Elias didn't sleep. He reread the sentence again and again. It was simple. The shape of silence is always a circle. He didn't know what it meant, but every time he spoke it, things around him seemed to shift slightly. Light bulbs dimmed. Clocks ran a little slower. The street outside grew strangely quiet, like the world itself was listening. He translated more. Each phrase seemed to affect the world differently. One morning, he read a line while holding a plant. Within minutes, the plant bloomed. A flower that hadn't opened in years unfurled its petals under a dim lamp. Another time, he read a paragraph while watching the news. The anchor paused mid-sentence, froze, then started talking about something else entirely, something that hadn't been planned. Elias checked later. The program had no record of that segment ever airing. He kept translating. He started logging everything. Experiments. Reactions. He created a chart, tracking which words changed what. But the more he read, the more he felt watched. Not by people, by something else. One night, he had a dream. In it, he stood in an endless library. All the books were blank, except one. The monastery book. It was open and it glowed faintly. A voice whispered behind him, low and cold. Each word you speak is a thread pulled too many and the fabric tears. He woke up in a sweat. His wall was covered in notes, symbols he didn't remember writing, but they made sense. They filled in the gaps. He knew then the book wasn't written in the past. It was being written in real time. Someone or something was updating it, constantly, and by speaking its words, Elias was writing into the book. He wasn't just translating it. He was adding to it, changing it. One day, he read a sentence about a woman named Sofia Navarro, the archaeologist who had vanished. The book described her final moments, how she touched the book, how she disappeared, how she would return. Return? Elias looked closer. The sentence changed as he read it. The future was being written as the present unfolded. That's when he knew this wasn't a book about the world. It was the world. A blueprint, a script, a hidden code running underneath everything. He translated one final sentence that night, one he had held off reading until now. A sentence written at the top of the first page, hidden under layers of invisible ink he had only just uncovered. The reader becomes the author. Elias closed the book. He looked outside. Snow was falling, but the forecast had said clear skies for the entire week. He smiled just a little. Then he spoke a line aloud, one he had made himself, in the book's strange, beautiful language. And the snow stopped. Elias Renn sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the book as if it were breathing. The room was still. The city beyond his window, usually buzzing with life, seemed frozen. No horns, no footsteps, just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't belong in a world full of noise. It wasn't natural. It was waiting. He'd been keeping a journal, dozens of pages, filled with notes about what happened each time he read from the book. He'd categorized phrases by effect. Some influenced nature, weather, animals, even time. Others seemed to touch people directly. Emotion, memory, even fate. But one category frightened him most, the ones that changed truth. He had tested a phrase on a news article. The headline had read, "Factory Fire Injures 5 in Lyon." He read one short sentence from the book aloud, something about flames that flicker but do not burn. He blinked, refreshed the page. The headline changed. Now it read, "Gas leak contained just in time. No injuries reported." He checked archive versions of page. They all matched the new version. It was as if the fire had never happened. At first, he told himself it was a mistake, some kind of glitch, coincidence. But it kept happening. In a local park, he read a line from the book and watched a stray dog stop limping. A man who passed by, coughing and wheezing, suddenly straightened and took a deep breath as if he hadn't tasted air in weeks. Elias began to feel a strange weight pressing down on him. Not guilt, yet, but awareness. Every word he spoke mattered now. Every page he turned could change something. And then came the dream again. The endless library. Only this time, someone else was there. A boy, pale, maybe 10 years old, standing at the far end between two empty shelves. He looked up, pointed at Elias, and said in a soft voice, "You wrote me wrong." Elias woke up shaking. The book was open on his lap. Even though he was sure he had closed it, the page it showed described a boy, pale, 10 years old, in a dream. Now he knew something important. The book didn't just shape the world. It remembered. He stopped reading it for 3 days, tried to return to normal life. He walked the same streets, past the same shops. But everything felt off. People stared longer than they should have. Street signs had slightly different names. Even his favorite coffee shop had a new logo, one he had never seen before. The world around him had shifted, slightly, but enough to notice. Enough to feel like the book's words were still rippling out, changing things beyond his control. And then came the letter. No stamp, no return address, just a single piece of parchment tucked under his door. One line written in the same strange script. "Your edits are causing noise." He stared at it for hours. Who had written it? How had they known? Were there others? He had to know more. So he returned to the book. And this time, he didn't just read it. He started speaking it. He read lines in the mirror, spoke them while walking, whispered them to shadows. Each time he saw a result. A bird that flew backward, A clock that ticked forward, then reversed. A man at a bus stop, crying one moment and laughing the next. Reality, it seemed, was suggestion. The book held more than words. It held threads, strings that connected everything: people, time, matter, memory. And Elias was beginning to pull them. One night, he read a phrase about a lost woman finding her way home. Minutes later, his neighbor, an old woman who had been missing for days, was found sitting calmly on the stairs, humming a lullaby from her childhood. She had no idea where she'd been. Another time, he tested the book during a violent thunderstorm. Read a short line about silence and calm. Within seconds, the thunder stopped. Rain vanished. The sky cleared, as if the storm had never come. And yet, every time he changed something, he felt it, some invisible reaction in the air, like pressing a hand against a wall and feeling it push back. Then came the incident that terrified him. He read a sentence about someone surviving a deadly fall. It was just a test. But later that night, he heard a scream outside, rushed to his window. A man had fallen from the 5th floor of a building across the street and landed, alive. No broken bones, no injuries, just confusion. Paramedics called it a miracle, but Elias knew he had caused it. He hadn't saved a man. He had written his survival into existence. He started to question if he could save people, stop disasters, undo mistakes. Wasn't he supposed to? Wasn't this a gift? But the more he changed, the more strange things began to happen. People forgot simple facts. Streets he knew well had different names. One day, he passed a statue in the park that hadn't been there the day before. When he checked online, it had always been there, according to every source. Reality was bending, and someone or something was noticing. It began subtly. Objects moved when he wasn't looking. A chair in the wrong place. His journal opened to a page he hadn't written yet. A knock at the door with no one there. Then came the phone call. A voice, distorted and mechanical, spoke one line. "You're not the first." Click. Elias's hand shook. He returned to the book. Search for clues. Search for names. And there, hidden deep in the folds of a paragraph he had skipped, he found a list, not of events, of readers. And his name was at the bottom, right below a name he didn't recognize. Navarro Sophia. She had read it. She had changed things. And now she was gone. Elias finally understood. The book wasn't just dangerous because of what it said. It was dangerous because it responded. And reality? Reality was no longer fixed. It was listening, and worse. It had begun to speak back. Elias sat in silence. The book, now wrapped in layers of cloth, rested on his desk like a sleeping animal. He hadn't touched it in days, afraid of what it might do next or what he might do through it. The lines between reading, speaking, and causing had blurred. His journal was filled with questions that had no answers. But one name kept echoing through his thoughts like a warning. Sophia Navarro. He had to find her. Every official record said the same thing. Navarro had disappeared during a dig. No signs of foul play. No trace. It was as if she had stepped off the map. But Elias now knew that in the world of the book, disappearance didn't mean death. It could mean rewriting, repositioning, or erasure. Still, he searched. He called old contacts, dug into forgotten archives, sent encrypted messages to underground forums. And finally, someone responded, not with words, but with coordinates, a place in southern France, deep in the mountains. There was no message attached, just a location. Elias hesitated only a moment. Then he packed the book, wrapped in protective layers, and boarded a train. He traveled under a false name, his mind racing with possibilities. Why there? What would he find? When he arrived, it was dusk. The mountains glowed with fading sunlight, casting long shadows over the valleys. The coordinates led to a narrow dirt path, half buried under fallen leaves and moss. It wound through the trees like a forgotten memory. After nearly an hour of walking, Elias came upon a stone archway, overgrown with vines. Beneath it, a wooden door, painted black. No signs, no markings. He knocked. Nothing. He turned to leave, but the door creaked open before he took his second step. A man stood inside, late 50s, sharp eyes, a long scar across his cheek. "You've been expected," he said. Elias didn't speak. He simply nodded and stepped inside. The air was cool, dry. The walls of the underground building were lined with shelves, books, scrolls, stones with markings. But none of it matched any museum or archive Elias had ever seen. The man led him down a winding hallway, then into a circular room. There were 7 people seated in silence. One of them was Sofia Navarro. She looked different, older somehow, though it hadn't been that long. Her eyes met Elias's, and she gave the smallest nod as if confirming what he already felt. This wasn't the end of her story. It was the next chapter. The man with the scar spoke first. "We are the Watchers." He didn't offer his name. He didn't ask Elias for his. He simply continued. "We've been waiting for another reader to appear. You're not the first, but you may be the last." The others watched Elias carefully. He asked the only question that mattered. "What is the book?" The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "It's not a book," he said. "It's a script, one of 7. That word again. 7. 7 what?" Elias asked. "Scripts," Sophia said softly. "Each one tied to a part of existence. Time, matter, emotion, memory, nature, will, and the 7th, the book you found, controls reality." Elias felt his chest tighten. "They were written," the scar man added, "by something or someone before what we call history began. We don't know who. We only know they exist, and they shape everything." He paused. "And every so often, someone finds one. The Watchers have protected this knowledge for generations. Sometimes they lost track of a script. Sometimes it resurfaced, and when it did, a new reader would emerge, someone like Elias or Sophia. But the danger wasn't in the reading. It was in the writing. The more you change, Sophia said, the more you damage the balance. Small edits, reality adapts. But large ones, entire parts of the fabric start to fray. Elias thought of the broken clocks, the different headlines, the boy in the dream. "So what do you want to do?" he asked. "Stop reading it?" The room fell quiet. "No," said the scar man. "You can't. Once you've begun, the book recognizes you. It binds to you, to your voice, to your intent. Then why bring me here?" "To warn you," Sophia said. She stood and walked to a shelf, pulled down a stone tablet, covered in the same script as the book. She handed it to Elias. "This is what happens when the book is abused," she said. Elias looked, a city crumbling into ash. Not metaphorically, literally. The carving showed people vanishing, buildings collapsing into themselves, time unraveling. "This happened once before," she whispered. "A reader in Babylon. He thought he could use the book to become a god. What happened to him?" Elias asked. "He rewrote so much, the world snapped back. Reality corrected itself." "How?" "It erased him, and everything he changed." The man with the scar stepped forward. "The book listens, Elias, but it also judges. If it senses abuse, it doesn't just punish the reader. It resets everything." Elias felt his knees go weak. Sophia stepped closer. "You've already made too many edits. Things are shifting. You've seen it." He nodded slowly. "We need to contain it," she said. "Not destroy it. It can't be destroyed, but it can be silenced." "How?" "By completing the script," the man said. "What do you mean?" "The book is unfinished. It's writing itself. The only way to stop it is to end the story." Elias looked at them all. "You want me to write the last page?" "No," Sophia said. "We want you to find it." They believed the final page was hidden, locked behind a barrier of reality and thought. Only someone who had fully understood the book could see it. And if that page was read, truly read, it might bring closure, balance. But there was a risk. What if the last page is the end of everything? Elias asked. No one answered. That night, Elias was given a room. He didn't sleep. The book lay beside him, silent, but he could feel it now, alive, breathing, waiting, and in his mind, a single question burned like fire. Was he still reading the book? Or was the book now reading him? The days that followed were filled with whispers, quiet meetings, careful walks through stone corridors lit only by flickering candles. Elias had become something between a guest and a prisoner, free to move within the Watcher's sanctuary, but always watched, always followed. He understood. They didn't distrust him exactly. They distrusted the book. And they were right to, because outside those mountain walls, the world was changing, and not slowly anymore. It began with a speech. A world leader appeared on live television and, in the middle of a prepared statement about trade negotiations, froze. His eyes glazed over. He began speaking a different language, not a known one, a language of symbols and sound that made no sense, and yet felt familiar to Elias. The script. Those who watched the broadcast said they felt strange afterward, lightheaded, confused, as if they had missed time. The footage disappeared within hours. Government sites removed it. Social media flagged and deleted every clip. But Elias had seen it live. He knew what it meant. Someone else had the book, or at least a copy. The Watchers were alarmed, but not surprised. They had long feared this moment. Once a script appears, Sophia told him, the echoes follow. It wasn't just one copy anymore. Somehow, the word was spreading, duplicating, like a virus, like a thought that couldn't be unsaid. And when something that powerful starts spreading, the powerful start paying attention. It didn't take long. Private jets arrived in remote regions. Unmarked helicopters hovered above known ruins. The Vatican held an emergency closed-door council. The Kremlin ordered excavations in forgotten Siberian temples. Tech billionaires began investing in ancient manuscript preservation, not out of love for history, but out of quiet desperation. Somewhere deep in a bunker, someone whispered, if we can control reality, we can own the future. The war for the book had begun, not with guns, not at first, but with information, surveillance, infiltration. Elias saw it happen from inside the Watcher's stronghold. Communications were intercepted. Routines shifted. 2 members of the group vanished without a trace. One found hours later, with no memory of who he was. They had been compromised. Sophia urged Elias to prepare. Someone will come for you, she said, not because of who you are, but because of what you carry. He didn't need convincing. The book was growing heavier, metaphorically and literally. It felt warm now, even when wrapped in cloth. At night, it pulsed faintly. And sometimes, when he passed a mirror, he thought he saw words shifting in his reflection, lines of script moving across his skin. He wasn't just a reader anymore. He was becoming a part of the book. One night, it happened. The sanctuary was breached. It wasn't loud. No explosions. Just sudden darkness. And silence. Lights failed. Doors opened by themselves. Elias ran through the halls, heart pounding. Shadows moved without source. The Watchers fought, but not with weapons, with their voices. They recited counterphrases from ancient texts, old protective verses passed down through generations. It helped for a while, but then came the intruders. Not soldiers, not agents, but something else. They wore clean suits, white masks, and in their hands they held tablets, each glowing faintly with the same script. Replicas, artificial versions of the book. They had built them using fragments, stolen from academic scans, whispered notes, anything they could find. But imperfect copies are dangerous, unstable, a word out of place, a sentence broken, and reality bends the wrong way. The ground shook, a hallway collapsing on itself, folding like paper. Time stuttered. Elias watched the man fall, rise, then fall again in a loop. Screams echoed and faded. Sophia grabbed Elias's arm. You have to go, she said. No, he replied. We can stop them. We can't, but you still can. She handed him a map. Oh, torn, almost unreadable. But Elias understood it instantly. The place it marked wasn't real. Not yet. It was the place described in the final part of the book. the place where the last page would reveal itself. He didn't ask how she had found it. She didn't say goodbye. Elias ran, out into the cold night. The wind screamed around him. The trees bent in directions they shouldn't. Lightning cracked sideways across the sky. Reality was breaking. The book burned in his bag, heat rising to the fabric. And as he ran, he felt it speaking, not in words, but in intention. It was guiding him, pulling him toward something, toward the end. But behind him, others followed, not just the masked intruders. Governments had learned of his location. A silent alliance had formed, nations and corporations who had agreed on only one thing. The book must be possessed, controlled, used. They weren't interested in balance. They were interested in power. Missiles were launched. Cities fell into darkness. People across the world reported visions, dreams of strange symbols, voices in their heads, time moving wrong. The book's influence had spread too far. The damage couldn't be undone. Elias reached the final checkpoint marked on Sophia's map, a stone circle deep in the forest. 7 stones, perfectly arranged, each marked with a different symbol. The 7 scripts. He placed the book in the center. The wind stopped. Everything stilled. And then the final page appeared. Blank. He reached out, hand shaking. But before he could touch it, before he could even read it, a voice echoed behind him. "You're not the author." Elias turned. It was a child, the same boy from the dream. Only now he wasn't 10. He was Elias, younger, smiling, and holding a different book. Reality writes itself. The boy said, "You were just holding the pen." And then he vanished. Elias looked back at the page. A single line had appeared. To finish the story, forget it. He didn't understand. Not fully. But somewhere inside, something clicked. He closed the book. Didn't speak. Didn't read. He let go, and the world paused, as if holding its breath, waiting. Elias stood in the circle of stones, the book silent in his hands. The wind had died, but the world still hummed, a strange vibration just beneath the surface of everything. Trees stood frozen mid-sway. A bird hovered mid-flight, wings unmoving. Time had slowed, or maybe paused altogether. He looked down. The book no longer glowed. Its warmth was gone. The last page, the one that had appeared blank moments ago, was now filled with ink that shimmered slightly, as though undecided. The line was still there. To finish the story, forget it. It made no sense. He had come all this way, risked everything, to find the final truth. And now, at the edge of understanding, he was being asked to forget. He turned the sentence over in his mind. Again and again. Forget it. The words echoed not as instruction, but as a paradox. How could forgetting be the answer? How could erasing knowledge bring completion? Then he remembered the boy, his younger self, or someone who wore his face. You were just holding the pen. And something clicked. The book didn't control reality. Belief did. The book was a mirror, a reflection of the reader's intent. It responded not to language, but to meaning, to desire, to fear, to certainty. And in all this time, reading, decoding, shaping, Elias had been feeding it power by believing it held it. The world was changing because he thought it could. It had never been about the book. It had always been about him, and maybe about all of us. He stepped away from the stone circle. The book remained on the ground, unmoving. He didn't need to carry it anymore, because he finally understood. Letting go wasn't surrender. It was the only way to win. But as he turned to leave, something unexpected happened. The air shifted. Time surged forward again. The bird flew. The trees rustled. And the final page in the book began to rewrite itself. A new line appeared. You chose not to write the end. So we begin again. Elias froze. He stepped back toward the book, watched as the shimmering text spread across the page, forming images, a scene, a city skyline, people walking, smiling, living, and then his own face, older, walking through the same forest, carrying nothing. He turned the page. More scenes unfolded. A world where the book had never been found. where the scripts had never been opened, where time flowed untouched, unedited, where life, imperfect, beautiful, chaotic, played out on its own terms. No gods, no readers, no controllers, just people living. The implication hit him hard. This was the reset. The book wasn't destroying reality. It was giving it a chance. A loop not of punishment, but of freedom. Each time a reader got too close, changed too much, believed too deeply, the story would bend back around. A reset written into the very fabric of the script. A fail-safe. But this reset was different. Elias had made no demand, no command, no wish. He had let go. And that, the book seemed to say, was the key. Behind him, the trees shimmered faintly. The stone circle cracked, the ancient symbols crumbling as if they'd served their purpose. The book, its pages now filled with calm, quiet scenes, slowly began to fade. Not in a dramatic burst, but gently, like mist in morning sunlight. Elias watched until there was nothing left but earth and silence. Months passed. Elias returned to Prague, or whatever version of it remained after the shift. He found his apartment unchanged, his books untouched, but the world around him had softened. There were no more whispers, no strange headlines. The snow fell when it was supposed to. The sun rose at its proper hour. People walked with ease, unaware how close they had come to living inside a written dream. Sofia Navarro had vanished again. Or perhaps she never existed in this new thread. He tried searching her name once. Nothing came up. But one morning, a postcard arrived at his door. No return address. Just a symbol on the front. A circle of 7 dots. Inside, one line. This time, let the story write itself. Elias smiled. He didn't need the book to understand anymore. Every day, every moment was a page. And every choice a word. The world didn't need a hidden book to shape it. It needed people willing to live without trying to control everything. Willing to embrace chaos, love, sorrow, chance. Willing to accept the story as it comes. So Elias wrote one final sentence in his journal. A simple sentence. One that held everything he had learned. There is no script greater than a life freely lived. And then he closed the journal, left it on the windowsill, and walked into a world that, for the first time in a long time, felt real. Not because it was perfect, but because it was his.